The year is 2025. For crafters and home sewists, the world continues to slip into a dystopian hellscape. Gone are the days when you might go to your local Fabricland, Lewis Craft, or Joann's and get a paper pattern for that perfect pair of pants. Well, perfect wardrobe, really. The alliteration was just too good to pass up. Lewis Craft went under decades ago. Joann closed up shop this year. Michaels is buying everything up, but here in Canada keeps the same old stuff on the shelves. The fate of the Big 4+ pattern company is currently up in the air, and they still don't produce patterns with consistent sizing. What's a plus-size girl to do? Especially if she wants to sew her own clothes. Well, let's discuss that. We'll talk about some of the companies and designers I've found that provide sizing to or past a 55-inch hip for both historical costuming and modern fashion, and places you can find new patterns and pattern companies. If you're new here, hi, I'm Mare. If you're a returning viewer, welcome back. Right out of the gate, I'd like to thank my channel members and Patreon supporters. They're part of the reason I can invest in patterns because independent pattern makers generally charge more than the Big 4+. That's Simplicity, McCall's, Butterick, and Vogue, with their comparatively more recent brand additions Berta, Know Me, and New Look. They don't have the massive amount of back catalog the Big 4+ can draw on. Independent pattern companies have more incentive to give you your money's worth than the Big 4+. They often provide a lot more sizes and resources, whether that's fitting instructions, video walkthroughs, tutorials, or more complicated construction and unique design. I love being able to test out new-to-me patterns and take folks along for the experience so they can get an idea whether it's something they want to try. That is, whether I'm talking about the pattern itself or a larger big-picture context. So thank you, supporters, for making this possible. I'd also like to thank viewer DaisyBall2338, who asked if I could put together a video about pattern makers who cater to plus-size persons. I hope this video helps you and others who are interested in plus-size sewing. Finally, I'd like to thank you for watching, hopefully to the end. I'd appreciate if you could boop the like button, and if you'd like to share in the discussion, the comments are open. Also, if you're not subscribed, you might just want to go ahead and click the subscribe button while you're down there. Usually YouTube lights it up when I say subscribe button, so it's easy to find. I'll be providing links to the pattern makers and/or companies mentioned in the video description for anyone who wants to check them out. A bit of a warning, we're eventually going to get into some murky waters, and that's because community is good, but it ruins everything. And companies can do and design wonderful things, and yet their owners and designers can voice problematic opinions or support questionable causes. This happens with both larger companies and, more often, smaller businesses where the owner is the major motivator of the brand. I'm not going to get into gossip or opinions on whether or not you should frequent a company where an owner has said something against inclusive sizing, put off including plus-size models on their website, said things indicating they think cultural appropriation is fine, or any other problematic issue. I'm just going to give you information on brands I've used in the past or heard good things about from others regarding pricing, fit, or customer service. I'll leave it to you to do the responsible adult thing that is fully researching the companies you buy from and consequently decide whether their personal or business beliefs line up with yours. Definitely feel free to discuss companies you like and dislike and why in the comments, but please keep it civil. I believe that companies catering to plus-size women and other underserved demographics should remember that word of mouth is usually the biggest sales motivator. Otherwise, why would companies approach or collaborate with influencers to get the conversation started? When I go to a pattern site, I'd like to see people like me on the landing page, catalog page, and pattern page alongside the straight-sized models. We're not a dirty secret, we're customers, just like straight-sized folks. And we like to be included. How else are we to know how your product fits or hangs? If the company's new to offering plus-size patterns, I'd appreciate if they standardized their sizing across the board. It might take a while, but I'd love if they updated any older, pre-plus-size garments with their new plus-size block, particularly if they're known for a particular look or style. Despite my dislike of the parent company and irresponsible billionaires in general, I use Instagram to look up clothing made by normal people who haven't been professionally posed. If pattern companies could use an Instagram aggregator plugin to add those photos directly to their pattern pages, maybe in a collapsible inspiration section, that would be fantastic. At very least, a link to the hashtag for the garment would be appreciated. It would mean not going to the company Instagram and scrolling through years of photos and videos that may not have been labeled with the hashtag, so I can look up what folks are doing with their clothes. I mean, I understand they want me to see everything, but looking at this month's swimsuit and last month's blouse isn't going to help me when I'm looking for jeans designed 2 or 3 years ago. Whether you believe it or not, my time, and yours, is worth something. Finally, I know a lot of smaller brands are heavily motivated by a cult of personality around the designer or business owner. When one launches a business, they have to start thinking about the needs of that business and put their personal feelings aside if they want to appeal to the largest amount of people. So the bare minimum for me would be finding out what values the community holds dear and respecting their beliefs. This is a problem particularly in historical costuming and vintage dress, where companies and designers will air inappropriate comments about the roles of women, religion, racism, and cultural appropriation. Then be upset when their bottom line is affected. Rule of thumb: if you know it's a problematic topic and you depend on people to buy your product, keep your trap shut. The flip side, of course, is that the community needs to also unclench their collective sphincters and know when to take a genuine apology. And on that note, let's look at some pattern companies. Historical costuming, for me, falls into a couple of different categories. Research from extant garments and manuals, and indie companies who make the pattern for you. In the first case, you're generally looking for books. If you're cheap like me, you probably want to go to the library. Or, if you feel like drafting your own patterns according to period sources, may I suggest archive.org. You can often find Victorian and Edwardian pattern drafting manuals online. Websites and blogs are another good resource, if you know how to find them. The last time I did this was about 20 years ago when LiveJournal was still a thing. The Janet Arnold Patterns of Fashion series of books are available through the School of Historical Dress. The series discusses and gives gridded patterns from historical dress based on hands-on research with extant garments and contemporary construction manuals. Also in this vein, Nora Waugh's Corsets and Crinolines in the Cut of Women's Clothing. For those looking for medieval and/or Norse clothing construction, Medieval Garments Reconstructed by Lily Franson, Anna Norgard, and Elsa Ostergaard is a short introduction to the finds from the Greenlandic, I'm going to mess this up, Herjolfsnes settlement, and it's available from Aarhus University Press in either print or PDF formats. Icelandic is not my first language, sorry. You don't know how many times it took for me to actually pronounce that properly. All these books can be quite pricey depending on print runs, availability, shipping, etc. The other options are independent pattern makers such as Truly Victorian, Black Snail, Laughing Moon Mercantile, and Margot's Patterns. Margot's Patterns concentrate mostly on the Tudor and Renaissance era. While the name sounded familiar, I came across them again while researching this topic. If you're looking for something specifically from the era, it looks like a good place to start. Black Snail has patterns spanning the 1700s through to the present for both women and men. They're well regarded by YouTube sewists and have been used by plus-size costuming YouTubers Noelle of Costuming Drama and Rebecca of Pocketful of Posies. Truly Victorian's specialty is the Victorian and Edwardian era, and they offer patterns to clothe the modern Victorian from the inside out with underwear, corsets, petticoats, skirts, bodices, and padding. Even this shirt and vest. Yes, this look is Victorian. Lazy Victorian. There's a lot there that you can work with. Obviously, I've used these patterns in the past, and I've found the instructions sometimes take for granted the sewist's experiences and capabilities. If you're having trouble and use Facebook, however, again, Facebook, they do have a group that you can join. There's quite a few folks there who are willing to help, including the actual company owner. I'd forgotten about Laughing Moon Mercantile until I was making this list, and that's because I was used to seeing only 2 of their corset patterns, usually available through third-party websites. They have all sorts of clothing patterns from the Regency to the 20th century for both women and men. Also quite a few service costumes like nanny, nurse, housekeeper, Red Cross, etc. And a rockabilly dress. You know, in case you're spending the evening in with the full custom gospel sounds of the Reverend Horton Heat. And when I mention third-party websites, I mean places like corset supply stores. The one I use generally is Farthingales in Ontario, Canada. They usually have a good selection, good price, and get things to you fairly quickly. Also spanning the vintage to modern era are Charm Patterns by Gertie. Again, if you're into rockabilly or psychobilly, or just want a cute vintage outfit for date night, these are fantastic. Gertie offers individual patterns for sale on her website and many more club patterns through her Patreon, many of which work with the base patterns found publicly available for sale on the website. If you're looking for a solid retro wardrobe, you're probably looking at Gertie's Patreon. Gertie also falls in the category of pattern makers who include multiple bust sizes for those of us who may need to do a full bust adjustment, but just don't wanna. Or we want to do the smallest full bust adjustment possible to our pattern pieces if we're particularly well endowed. Occasionally, she includes patterns for men. We're going to head into clothing that's a little more contemporary now, and I've split them into 4 categories. Big indie pattern companies, smaller indie pattern companies, Microindies, and the Jersey Knit Mom Squad. Let's start at the top. The big indie pattern companies. In this case, indie or independent seems to refer mostly to not big 4. At least that's my takeaway. For me, this category is for companies that have a sizable enough back catalog to make a decent wardrobe, so dresses, jumpsuits, and basic separates that can get you through casual, business casual, or dressy occasions, depending on the fit and the fabric. They have a solid brand, a look of their own, they aren't trying to emulate anyone else, and they include both straight and plus sizes as part of their branding. When it comes to their web presence, for the most part, they have their poop in a pile. In some cases, they have a devoted plus-size following. They've carved out a place in their niche, and they're not only defending their territory, in some cases they seem to be collaborating. On rare occasions with each other, but mostly with mutual fabric retailers. I've seen Blackbird Fabrics mentioned a lot. For me, these pattern brands are Cashmerette, Helen's Closet, and Closet Core / Deer and Doe. You notice that for most of these pattern makers, there are definite basics. A long sleeve button-down shirt, jeans, trousers, elastic-waisted casual pants, a t-shirt, sundresses, trendy dresses, overalls, and jumpsuits. All part of creating a fun core wardrobe. It's just what you do with it, and whether they've added on any extras. So for example, the button-down shirt for Closet Core is Jenna, for Helen's Closet it's Cameron, and for Cashmerette it's Winvale. Each brand fits a little differently and has different quirky features, and their standout outfits are different. But there is some crossover, which is nice because you get a bit of variety. If one brand doesn't suit you, the other one might, and you can essentially mix and match between brands. Cashmerette definitely tries to fit all areas of life. There's slacks, skirts, blazers, and blouses for work, relaxed casual clothing for days off, and formal wear for dressy events. They also have accessories like vests and jackets to help dress your outfit up or down. Designer Jenny Rushmore has also written at least 2 books that come with patterns designed to teach. I'm gonna grab the books.
A few moments later.
I found the books. We've got Ahead of the Curve, which was given to me by one of my patrons. Thank you so very much. And Christmas present from the Husbeast, Sewing the Curve. The books come with patterns and they're designed to teach potential plus-size sewists to make their own clothes, and her website has both public and club offerings as well as classroom lessons. Full disclosure, this video is not sponsored by Cashmerette, but they did offer me a year's full subscription to their pattern club as part of an influencer offer last autumn, and I really can't say enough good things about it. There's sewing tutorials for both pattern-specific and general sewing techniques, information about approaching sewing from a position of body neutrality, and a lot of patterns. One of my favorite me-made t-shirts is from the club, this one here, and I made it on my own time because I didn't want to have to film disappointment if I messed it up. It's fantastic, it fits beautifully, and I've used some of the tutorial and masterclass information to level up my own sewing. That said, I've bought Cashmerette patterns with my own money and they were well worth the expense. They fit well and they look good. So that's a personal opinion, not a paid one. I also love Helen's Closet. A friend of mine gently accused me of having a very 70s style. I have no idea where she got that idea. And I'm not sure whether that was a reflection on the pattern itself or the fabric I chose to make it with. Probably a combination of the two. There's a weird crunchy granola part of the 70s that resides in my soul and my fashion sense that tries to avoid polyester and yearns for the post-Woodstock vibe, I guess. Not that I was there, I was born well afterwards. Helen's Closet is based out of British Columbia, so that kinda tracks. The designs are mostly laid back, easygoing, and remind me a lot of the fun Canadian West Coast lifestyle I remember from being a kid there in the late 70s. Sundresses for wandering Birchart Gardens, the odd floaty evening dress, pants, jumpsuits, and overalls to wear on a hike in the mountains or to a potluck, or to cut down into shorts for the beach or a festival. Closetcore, on the other hand, strikes me as a blend of modern and nostalgia that somehow manages to stay fresh. Some of the styles are fun callbacks to pop and folk stars of the 60s and 70s. The Mitchell trousers, for instance, are inspired by the deeply pleated men's trouser look that Joni Mitchell used to favor. There's a witchy dress, in the right fabric, appropriately named Nicks, after Stevie Nicks, that just screams to be made of black eyelet and worn with a top hat, and this is going to happen at some time. Hopefully this year. My plus-size Wednesday Addams look last fall is based on the dress version of Closetcore's Jenna shirt, and it's fantastic. It's made of double gauze, so it's warm in the winter when I need something soft to snuggle in and wrap around my legs, and it's cool in the summer because it's cotton gauze. It fits big, so it makes me feel a little smaller by default. Closetcore, like Cashmerette, has a monthly pattern club. Unfortunately, I'm not a member, so I can't speak to its pros and cons. I heard a while back that they were archiving some of their past club offerings, and that doesn't strike me as all that great. I'm generally not in favor of brands yeeting products into the proverbial Disney vault. If you made it for the club, keep it for the club. They purchased Deer and Doe a while back, and I seem to remember seeing something about Deer and Doe being more size inclusive, but their older patterns only seem to stop at a 48-inch hip. Their newer patterns, however, appear to go to a 62-inch hip, and Closetcore have said that any new patterns made under the brand will use the larger sizing. I think they had some trouble redesigning one of the earlier patterns for the larger block, so they've put updating the older patterns on indefinite hold. To me, Deer and Doe style trends youthful with clean lines that elongate the body. Kind of reminds me a bit of European styles of the past 50 years, updated for a more accessible modern aesthetic. Unfortunately, they commit the unforgivable sin of copiously front-pleated trousers and shorts. Might have looked good on David Bowie in 1983, but having lived through that experience in the 80s, I'd prefer not to draw that much attention to my waist, stomach, and hips. There are others in this category, I just haven't had time to explore them all. I believe Style Arc, So Liberated, Friday Pattern Company, and Seamwork have fairly large-sized catalogs with hips up to or around 60 inches. Most of what I know about them is vague, and I haven't had a chance to check out their websites in any depth. They're new-to-me companies that I haven't heard a lot about. Smaller indie pattern companies are either up-and-comers or established brands that don't have a full wardrobe yet, haven't really broken through for plus size, or whose websites are in a state of flux, don't have plus size pictures, etc. They have a good amount of patterns, so they've been at this a while and likely have a small but dedicated team working behind the scenes. They're still working on pulling some things together. Some of the companies need to decide if they're going to include workwear or trousers or shoot for a solid aesthetic. Or they've nailed the aesthetic, they're just fleshing out their pattern library because they've diversified to include men, non-binary persons, folks with special needs, and or children. Brands I'd put in this category are Twig and Tail, Muna and Broad, Jennifer Lauren Handmade, Tilly and the Buttons, Daughter Judy, and Sew House 7. Twig and Tail are a fast-rising up-and-comer. They don't cater strictly to women, but the whole family. Their offerings lean to folks who like to get out in nature, whether it's hiking or picnicking in the woods. Not much in the way of business attire or trousers, but the aesthetic is a blend of cottagecore and simple fantasy comfort clothing. They put emphasis on customizing your own clothes with other handicrafts, such as embroidery or other embellishments. It's kind of what Wesley and Buttercup would wear on their day off. Twig and Tail also builds in consideration for people with sensory issues, nursing parents, and, to a degree, mobility issues. If rough seams are a no-go for you, you'd be surprised what they hide behind facings, French seams, and the judicious use of elastic. Muna and Broad are well known for their glebe pants and somewhat boxy, oversized shirts. However, if you look beyond those offerings, you'll see that they also have slip dresses, a camisole top, PJs, and at least 2 other pairs of pants. They take the alternate view of designing for plus-size bodies first, rather than as an afterthought or value add. I had mixed results with the pattern that I tried. You know how sometimes a project seems cursed despite trying really hard to get it right? That was me on that project. I'll still happily recommend the company though. I'm looking forward to more designs. I found Jennifer Lauren handmade via my friend Ashley Main. She made a list of shirt dresses for Shirtwaist September, and the Asteria dress, which I made and love, was on the list. It's my formal/date night dress. Fashions have a somewhat retro twist. The storefront features illustrations, so you have to go to each pattern page for a better picture of the outfit, but at least the illustrations include plus-size bodies alongside straight sizes, and they give a good idea of the overall style. The photos are also a good range of small, medium, and large. It looks like Jennifer Lauren Handmade is still dipping their toes into trouser construction, but if you're looking for cute, retro, twee, or hipster wear for ladies, you'll have some good choices. Really, some of the styles look like they'd pair fantastically with black-framed cat's eye glasses, a light cardigan, tights, and chunky Mary Janes. Tilly and the Buttons came in riding that twee hipster wave back when they only sold straight sizes. Now they've expanded into plus sizes and more wardrobe-friendly garments. They've kind of dropped that aesthetic. The pivot appears to be beginner-friendly clothing and a young DIY learn-to-sew theme, no matter your actual age. I haven't tried a Tilly make yet, but I'm interested to see where they're going. I've been on a trouser kick lately, and daughter Judy came a little late to the game for my most recent adventures. Video coming soon or linked above, depending on when you find this video. They're well known for the daughter Judy booty and well-fitting jeans and pants for straight and plus sizes. Pity they don't have any pictures of plus-size models or samples on their website. From the examples I saw on their site, they're still small with limited offerings and trying to figure out if they're going to be the home sewing dupe of labels like Rachel Comey and A Piece Apart, which I suspect is the comfort zone of the designer who apparently worked for those brands. The website definitely has the same aesthetic, with slender models scowling at the camera like I've offended them by wanting to know what the clothes look like. Personally, I'd like to think that anyone with the sense of humor to name their company Daughter Judy, and, own the fact that their jeans fit one's arse properly, can come up with their own site design and overall aesthetic, as well as pictures including their well-regarded plus sizes. Just a hint there. Sew House 7, on the other hand, I wasn't expecting them. The designs feel European to me. Might be the warehouse window, brickwork, and cream wall backgrounds paired with simple clean lines and neutral colors that photograph well. Earlier pattern backgrounds incorporate greenery. Reminds me of trips to Quebec when I was a kid. I wasn't expecting the styles to fit, but they do have a curvy size extension. The sizes aren't lumped together on the catalog page, so there's no fight as to whether the plus size model or straight size model is featured. Instead, the plus and straight sizes are treated as separate to give each its own room and combined on the linked pattern page. I do appreciate that as the company and its offerings grows, the sizing of the plus size model also varies. It's easy for me to think that at least 3 models should be used. It's another for the company to realize that's what's needed. Small straight size, early plus size or average size, which many straight size people think is plus size, and an obese person. That way you have a nicely rounded variety of folks to drape off of. Not apologizing for the pun. I can tell you that their Oxbow pants are a definite win, and at some point I'd like to try their new Tumalo knit jumpsuit. I have a plaid knit that just might make a fantastic romper from that pattern. Then there's the Microindies. That's what I consider companies or pattern makers/designers that are, for the most part, solo operations or side hustles. They might be part of the plus size or inclusive sewing community and developed a design from their experience, or came up with a viral pattern that was the jumping off point for new designs. They don't have a full wardrobe, but they're not quite as established yet as a Twig and Tail or Jennifer Lauren Handmade. Sometimes they have their own website, sometimes they're only available on Etsy. This is the land of dress dupes, history-bound in clothes, and talented or lucky beginners. Often both at once. Wildflower Design is the source of the super popular coquelicot skirt, which takes inspiration from 18th century petticoat and skirt construction. At some point I need to try this with the slightly less bulky version of the skirt and a lighter fabric. And no lacing, because cats. Wildflower also designed the cottagecore liseron blouse and dress, and I see they've added trousers with an interesting opening to the mix, so that's one I'll have to try someday. Tiana Herring designed the juniper dress, which I made not too long ago. It's inspired by a utility dress by a company called Noble, and it's a good dress. Cute, comfy. Wear shorts underneath because otherwise you risk showing off your knickers. There is a longer dress hack for those of us with excessive modesty. I didn't use it. Tiana also has a jumpsuit pattern built around the same general shape as the dress, so worth a look. Sid Graham, yes, I'm jumping around a bit, is the designer of the Lane pants, which I think is viral or semi-viral. They're a simple, versatile, elastic-waisted casual pant. From what I can see, they're also wildly popular. Sid has a small selection of garments on her site, 2 dresses, a skirt, and a quilted front-tied vest in addition to the pants. It's a good start. The site indicates the target demographic is young beginner sewists, probably members of Gen Z, which is fantastic. We need more folks sewing and keeping places like Fabricland in business. Maybe convince Michaels to actually invest in their sewing section instead of just, a little bit of popular fabric and a cutting table. Cinnamon Daisy Studios is the source of the poppy dress, a fitted sundress with strap and sleeve variations that can also be broken down into separates. It's a cute dress that could easily skew retro with a little skirt hacking. Cinnamon Daisy also have 2 more dresses, a skirt, and some accessories listed on their site. Definitely looking forward to what comes next. Last in this section, at least for now, Orlin Patterns. I was acquainted with the designer when they were an up-and-coming costume YouTuber, and their styles definitely reflect that. Orlin Patterns are updated versions of historical clothes that are perfect for history bounding or just adding a little fantasy to your everyday wardrobe. I think the best known pattern of the bunch is the Sophie tent dress, which is based on a Victorian pattern, but screams Howl's Moving Castle. It can be worn loose or belted, though I'd probably just pair it with an underbust corset. But that's me, and I'm not normal. Orlin Patterns also has Victorian combinations and a chemise, which would make a fantastic night dress or Bernadette Banner cosplay, an Edwardian trumpet skirt, and an updated 1860s women's Garibaldi shirt with poofy sleeves. For trousers, they have pirate pants, poofy short sarouels, and the olive pants, pleated Bowie-esque trousers that they describe as vintage, but could stem from menswear of the 1920s or the 1980s. Orlin Patterns come out at their own pace after lots of testing, so I don't expect them to race to Closet Core or Helen's Closet scale anytime soon. That said, I'll be keeping my eyes peeled for the next pattern to drop. I'm calling the last group the Jersey Knit Mom Squad, and that's not to be mean, but because it's a lot of jersey knits with some woven stuff thrown in. These designers have massive catalogs of patterns, a lot of emphasis on family clothing, particularly for ladies and kids, and there's a lot of variations on a theme. These companies are really popular on, you guessed it, Facebook again. That's not to say the clothes aren't good, but I think the overall opinion of the folks in Reddit's Craft Snark was suburban PTA mom. They made a lot of noise about the amount of double-brushed poly spandex used and remarked about poor drafting and rushed design. And yeah, that's the polite version. Companies in this group are Ellie & Mac, Patterns for Pirates, Made for Mermaids, and Love Notions. I've tried a woven Ellie & Mac tank top, looked too small in the pattern, and after I adjusted it, was too big. Jersey knit top I made didn't turn out like I thought it should, and that could have been the fabric or it could have been the pattern. Too tight in the sleeves, too tight in the bust, even though we've got quite a bit of stretch. At some point I planned to make the Laundry Day tee by Love Notions. The pattern itself went together well, so I guess I'll let you know eventually how putting the fabric together goes. So while some folks have reported great experiences with these designers, these are definitely listed as use at your own risk. Or if you have a lot of, jersey knit material that you need to use up fast. I'm constantly finding new patterns and designers, and there are a few resources out there to help you get started too. If you're on Instagram, I definitely recommend following the Curvy Coven UK. They showcase plus-size sewists and their creations. While it may or may not have been where I first saw Tiana Herring's juniper dress, the Curvy Coven UK is definitely one of the places I saw a lot of examples of it. I think they've also mentioned when a style arc pattern becomes popular. Sometimes there's sew-alongs, and it's fantastic to see so many examples of the same garment on different plus-size bodies. Sometimes I go on Instagram Safari. I look up a company I know, explore a couple of their hashtags, check out the accounts of other people posting on those hashtags, and see what else they've been making. Does it have plus sizes? Do they look good? That's how I discovered Sew House 7. If this is information I can glean from a few sources on Instagram without clicking on the inevitable advertisements for clothing companies that don't cater to my size, then it's possible you'll have the same, if not better, luck with the search. I've also discovered 2 websites that have opened up my ability to check for new patterns. If you're a knitter, crocheter, or spinner, basically fiber artiste, you're probably already aware of Ravelry, a site that allows you to purchase your patterns, store them in your library, itemize your stash inventory, keep a running log of your projects, and talk with other crafters, among many other things. Threadloop is much like Ravelry for sewists. You can't buy patterns there that I know of, but you can track your inventory and your makes. There are usually lists of new patterns coming out. I'm still getting to know the site, but it looks like it could be a really useful tool, and I do see folks commenting on each other's finished projects, so it might be a good way to find an online community. My Next Make is a really useful site that lists patterns. You can keep an eye on the main page for a running list of new pattern releases. If I like something I see, I check out the pattern designer's website. If they have plus sizes, huzzah! This is a really useful tool for finding new names of pattern companies I'm not familiar with. A couple of places that may or may not be useful: patternreview.com. It looks out of date, but you can turn up good information on Pattern Review. It's a place where you can get a fairly honest opinion on a pattern because nobody's being compensated for it in any way. You'll also find out if there's something wrong with it because the sewing community tends to call things out. I've hunted through it a few times on my search for samples made by real people or fitting information for certain patterns, so it's worth having in your back pocket as a resource. One site I wish was still updating is the Curvy Sewing Collective. For all I know, it's still going strong on Facebook. Bloody Facebook. But the web presence hasn't been updated in at least 2 years. I understand that Jenny Rushmore of Cashmerette was one of the original founders and possibly motivators of the site, and now has a business with its own community to manage. But still, I came across a list of plus-size pattern companies circa 2020 on the personal blog of Megan, one of the editors of the Curvy Sewing Collective. Some of the names I'd never heard of, so I've included the link in the description to the video, in case you'd like to check out the list as well. I don't really know of any real podcasts about garment sewing or plus-size sewing, so if you know any that you think might suit, definitely mention it in the comments. No links. Links have been turned off for the safety of the community, but dropping names is always fine. I also recommend checking out your local fabric stores, and I bet you thought I'd forget about that option. You've been bouncing the camera. Yes, you have. There are at least 2 stores in my city other than Fabricland that don't assume all sewists are quilters. I've found popular indie tissue print patterns at both. One also carries sewing magazines, so if you want the European Berta, it's there. Plus some others. I'm not really all that conversant on all the different sewing magazines because some don't cater to plus sizes or cater more to kids' clothing, etc. And that's it! Again, I'd like to thank my channel members and Patreon supporters for all their help making this video. DaisyBall2338 for the topic, and you for watching to the end. Hi. Apparently I brought a spider upstairs on my Jennifer Lauren handmade dress, and so now I'm hoping that he's not, roaming all over the place in my footage. Kind of squicks me out and makes me want to go back upstairs.